chapter 2.2, and we're going to be looking at the multiplication property of equality. Objective 1, we're going to use the multiplication property of equality to solve equations. So recall from chapter 2.1 that the addition property said the following: we can add or subtract the same number on both sides of the equation without changing the equation solution. Now the multiplication property says we may multiply or divide the same non-zero number on both sides of the equation without changing the equation solution. So to get some practice, let's go to page 130 and we're going to look at problems 1, 15, and 17. So the instructions say solve each equation using the multiplication property of equality. Be sure to check your proposed solutions. In number 1, we have x divided by 6 equals 5. So x over 6 equals 5. And of course, when it says solve, our goal is to isolate the variable, which is x. So let's draw my gate. Now, in order to get x by himself, I have to move this 6. But what is the 6 doing to the x? It is dividing. And what's the opposite of division? It should be multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 6 on both sides of the equation. The 6's cancel out, and we're left with x equals 30. And of course, you can check this by plugging it back in. 30 over 6 is equal to 5. So the opposite of multiplication, or multiplying, is dividing, and the opposite of dividing is multiplying. All right, number 15. So now we have 17y equals 0. This time we're solving for y, and we see 17 is hanging out with him. Now what is the 17 doing to the y? It's multiplying. So in between here there's a little dot, and it means multiplication. So what's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by 17. Divide by 17. We have y on the left side equals, well, 0 over 17 is 0. And of course you can check it. 17 times 0, well, that gives you 0. And then number 17. Now we have 2/3 y equals 12. So 2 over 3, y equals 12. Now the fraction 2 over 3, it is multiplying by y, which means we would divide by 2/3. However, you do not divide by fractions. Instead, you multiply by the reciprocal. And the reciprocal is just a fancy name for the flip. So all you need to do is flip the fraction. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3 over 2. Notice that the 2 and the 3, they cancel out, and we're left with y equals, and then 12 times 3/2, or 3 over 2, is 18. So y equals 18. And again, you can check this by plugging it back in. Alright, objective 2 now says solve equations in the form negative x equals c. Recall that c is just any real number. So again, let's go to page 130 and we're going to look at problems 21, 23, and 25. Same instructions. It says solve each equation using the multiplication property of equality. Be sure to check your proposed solutions. And then 21 says negative x equals 17. So our goal is to solve for x. However, x is not by himself. there's actually a -1 in front of the x. So let me rewrite this. So we really have -1x equals 17. Now what is the -1 doing to the x? It is multiplying. Therefore, we're going to divide both sides by -1, divide by -1. And we end up with x equals -17. Now notice it's just the opposite. If -x equals 17, then x equals -17. All right, number 23. So now we have -47 equals -y. And remember, we're solving for y, which means we want it to say y equals something. So since it's just a negative sign, it's just going to be the opposite. And the opposite of -47 is +47. So y equals 47. You should get the same answer if you divide both sides by -1. And then number 25. Now it says -x over 5 equals -9. Now let's go ahead and put in the 1 in front of the x. So this really says -1 over 5x equals -9. Notice that I took the negative sign and put it up top with the 1. I could have put it with the 5, but I will never put it with both. Usually it's written with the top number. So it really does say -1 over 5, and then I slid the x over to the side. Now, I need to isolate the x, which means I need to move the -1 over 5. It's multiplying x, but it's a fraction, therefore we're going to multiply by the flip, which will be 5 over -1. Make sure you do it on both sides of your equation. Your -1's cancel out, your 5's cancel out, leaving you with just x equals +45. And of course you can check it by plugging it back in. Okay, so now objective 3 says use the addition and multiplication properties to solve equations. Recall that the addition property says that we can add and subtract the same numbers on both sides of the equation, and the multiplication property says we may multiply or divide the same non-zero number on both sides of the equation. Okay, so let's look at number 29. Now the instructions say solve each equation using both the addition and multiplication property. And we have 2x plus 1 equals 11. We're going to go ahead and solve for x, which means we need to move the 2 as well as the 1. So we're going to be doing the addition and the multiplication property together. Move the term that is adding or subtracting first. So this plus 1, we're going to move first, which means we need to subtract 1 on both sides. On the left side, we're left with 2x equals, and on the right side, we get 10. Then the last thing we're going to do is the multiplication property. So we need to move the 2. In order to move it, we're going to divide by 2. So we end up with x equals 5. And of course, you can check this by plugging it back in. 2 times 5 plus 1, well, that is 11. All right, let's look at number 39. So now we have negative x minus 3 equals 3. And again, we're solving for the variable x. So this negative sign in front of x has to go, and the negative 3 or the minus 3 has to go. Do the addition property first, so anything subtracting or adding, move first. So minus 3, in order to move it, we're going to say add 3. add 3. So now we have negative x equals positive 6. Now we need to take care of that negative sign, but because it's just a negative, x is going to be equal to the opposite. So x is going to be equal to negative 6. And then number 41. Now we have 6y equals 2y minus 12. This time we have y's on both sides of our equation. So we need to get our y's together. Recall in chapter 2.1, I said to always move the smaller y. But now that we know how to use the multiplication property, it is your choice. However, it is convenient for us to move the 2y. Now, since we're moving this entire thing, we're going to subtract. So minus 2y minus 2y. Now we have 4y equals negative 12. And then the last thing we're going to do is divide by 4. Divide by 4 on both sides of the equation. And we have y equals negative 3. And you can take the solution and plug it back into the original equation. And if the left side equals the right side, then your answer is correct. All right, let's look at number 47. And we have 8y plus 4 equals 2y minus 5. So again, we have our variables on both sides of the equation. So let's get our variables together. Remember, it does not matter which one you move. So just to prove that, let me move the 8y. So I'm going to move the 8y by subtracting 8y on both sides. And now I have 4 equals negative 6y minus 5. Now we're solving for y, which means we need to move the negative 6 as well as the minus 5. Remember, do the addition property first. So anything adding or subtracting should go first. So this minus 5 we're going to move by adding 5 on both sides. So now we have 9 equals negative 6y. And then the last thing we're going to do is divide both sides by negative 6. Divide by negative 6. And we end up with y equals negative 3 over 2. All right, let's look at number 49. And we have 6z minus 5 equals z plus 5. So remember, we're going to get our z's on the same side of the equation. So let's go ahead and subtract z on both sides. So now we have 5z minus 5 equals 5. And then we're going to solve for z. So the first term we're going to move is the minus 5. We're going to move it by adding 5 on both sides. And we end up with, on the left side, 5z equals 10. And then the last thing we're going to do is divide by 5. Divide by 5. So z equals 2. And then last one, number 53. It says negative 3y minus 1 equals 5 minus 2y. So let's start by getting our variables together. Let's move this minus 3y, or this negative 3y. In order to move it, let's add 3y on both sides. Add 3y. So now we have negative 1 equals 5 plus y. And then let's subtract 5 and subtract 5. We end up with y equals negative 6. And remember, you can check all of these answers by plugging them back into the original equation. And if you get the left side to equal the right side, then you can trust that your answer is correct. Alright, last objective is objective 4. It says to solve applied problems using formulas. So let's look at number 67. And it says the formula m equals to n over 5 models your distance m in miles from a lightning strike in a thunderstorm if it takes n seconds to hear the thunder after seeing the lightning. And then 67 says, if you are 2 miles away from the lightning flash, how long will it take the sound of thunder to reach you? So let's start by writing the formula. M equals n over 5. And then remember, because it's a formula, let's make sure we understand what the variables represent. M is miles, and n is seconds. And then in number 67, it tells us we are 2 miles from the lightning flash. So m is equal to 2. And it says, how long will it take the sound of thunder to reach you? Which means we're looking for n. So now let's go ahead and take m equal to 2 and plug it in. So we're going to have 2 equals n over 5. Then let's solve for n. So we need to move the 5. 5 is dividing, so let's multiply and multiply. So 5 times 2 is 10. So 10 equals n, which means n is 10 seconds. Okay, so this will conclude our video for 2.2. Please email me if you have any questions.